good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you are. I hope that you are having a wonderful, day, week, weekend. So my name is Dr. JPB Gerald, or Justin, and I have written a book called Antisocial Language Teaching, English and the Pervasive Pathology of Whiteness. I am here to give you a little bit of maybe why you should buy the book, why the book matters now, or obviously I'm a little biased, but why I think the book matters. Well, let me give you, because that's a weird title. If you haven't heard of the book, which I don't know who is watching this who hasn't heard of the book, but in case you haven't, it comes from antisocial personality disorder, which you may or may not know is basically the real, like the medical thing. We call people like sociopaths. You can't go to the doctor. The doctor's not going to say you're a sociopath. That's not a real medical thing. It's not a diagnosis, but antisocial personality disorder is. There is a complicated story as to why I chose that. I saw it on TV and it was being used in a way that was racist. And I thought about how that the diagnosis of people can be used to place undesirable groups in negative spots. So I wrote an entire book talking, questioning the authority that powerful groups have on defining who is ordered and disordered. So that includes Black people, it includes language learners, and it includes the disabled. All of these groups are separate, but they overlap, of course. So this is a book about how the centering of whiteness in English language teaching renders the field unable to detach itself from the way that it creates hierarchies and stigmatizes groups of people. It's kind of a strange concept for a book, and it's in 3 parts. The first part, because it's such an odd concept, is basically explaining all of that. So it's connecting history of whiteness to Blackness, to disability, back to language, and then all the way back around to whiteness. And then the second part, I take the criteria from the DSM, the American Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders, and there's 7 of them. And I go through all 7 of those criteria, and I match them to some aspect of the English language teaching field and show how the centering of whiteness makes it so that even though people would prefer to diagnose undesirable people as an issue, they are in fact the ones who are, if anyone is antisocial, it is actually the people doing the diagnosis. That's the conceit of the book. And then in the third part of the book, I bring in my research from my dissertation and some, my own story, and understand that I don't have the ability to write an academic book that isn't really tied to my own story. It's the only way I know how to write. It's the only way I can be good at writing. So do understand that it's very personal work. All of my work is personal. I think that academic works are seen as less legitimate if they're personal, right? Academia is supposed to be impersonal. And I think that impersonality excludes a lot of marginalized, minoritized people. So I think that really sums up what's in the book pretty well. People who've read it so far, including people who are pretty big in the field of, racism research or language research, right? Including Victor Ray, who's written a lot of work about racism, and Scott Thornbury, who was my professor in my master's program, who, if you know academic books about language, you probably read something he's written. Well, they got blurbs on the book. They enjoyed what I wrote. They enjoyed the way I wrote it. It's not as expensive as an academic book usually is. Most of these books are $50, $60, $70, $80, $90, $100. And the hard copy of this book is like inexplicably expensive. But you don't have to buy the hard copy. If you buy the paperback, it's only $25 or 25 pounds or euros, which means it's actually different prices depending on where you live, because $25 is not 25 pounds. But anyway, it's accessible in the way it's written, it's accessible in its price, and it's accessible in the sense that I want people outside of the language teaching space to read it. I want the language teachers to read it, but if you aren't necessarily a language teacher right now, because I'm not right now, I'm no longer a language teacher, I still think that you would enjoy it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you pick up the book. And if you are a professor or a teacher, pick up the book, bring it into class, and then bring me in there. And I'd love to talk about it to students, because talking about it to students is probably my favorite thing in the world. All right.